Hi, welcome to the Intro to Fiction Writing series. Today, we're going to talk about structure. Structure is how you put your story together. It helps you figure out which events to include in your story, when they happen, and how they are organized. Structures are patterns that readers are familiar with, which gives them an idea of how your story is going to work. For example, let's say you're telling a knock-knock joke. The structure for that is 5 parts. 1. Knock knock. 2. Who's there? 3. The answer, such as boo. 4. The repeated answer with who at the end, like boo hoo. 5. The funny or not so funny punchline response to part 4, like OMG, why are you crying? There are lots of structures you can use to write stories. In this video, I'm going to cover a simplified version of the popular 3-act structure. In Act 1, we meet our main character, the world of the story, and the problem the character is facing. This is the beginning of the story. In Act 2, we watch the main character struggle through challenges leading up to facing that problem. This is the story's middle. In Act 3, the main character finally faces the problem and succeeds or fails. We may also see how they've changed or what happens after. This is the story's end. Let's take a look at each act in more detail. And to make that easier, I'm going to use a nursery rhyme that many of you may be familiar with. Humpty Dumpty. For those who aren't, here's how it goes. Humpty Dumpty sat on a wall. Humpty Dumpty had a great fall. All the king's horses and all the king's men couldn't put Humpty together again. So let's see how we can build a story around these events using the 3-act structure. We start with Act 1. This is the part of the story where we introduce the main character, the setting, and the problem. For our example story, we can say it takes place in a kingdom because the last part of the nursery rhyme talks about the king's men. We also know there's a wall in the story, and our main character's name is Humpty Dumpty. Does that seem like we've got all the bases covered? Main character, setting, and problem? Almost. We don't know why Humpty wants to climb the wall. The setting is kind of basic, and we haven't identified the problem. So let's think about this further. Having a strong beginning helps to get readers interested. It makes it easier to write the middle and the end. Let's start with Humpty. What do we know about him? He's an egg, right? How about he's the only egg person in the whole kingdom, so he feels like he doesn't fit in. That's really relatable because a lot of us feel that way sometimes. We'll also say he's an orphan who doesn't know where he comes from because he was found in a basket by the wall when he was a baby. We can do a deeper dive into character creation at another time, but this is a good start for our example. Now let's develop the setting a bit more. How about we say that the tall enchanted stone wall surrounds the entire fairy tale kingdom, keeps everyone inside safe, and keeps danger outside. It doesn't even have a door. Only the king can make it open with magic. What else? Maybe climbing the wall is forbidden. That could be a problem if Humpty has to get up to the top. But why would he want to? Maybe he thinks the only way to find out who his family was and why they left him is to see what's on the other side of the wall. The wall has definitely become our story problem, and even better, it works as a problem in 2 ways. It's a physical challenge because Humpty has to climb it. This is often referred to as the external conflict because it's something out in the world that the main character needs to overcome. But it's also an emotional challenge, an internal conflict. Does Humpty listen to the rules that say, don't climb the wall? Or does he listen to his heart that tells him he needs to climb it to find out who he is? Oh, let's also say he's afraid of heights. Now it's a really big problem because he feels like he has to climb that wall, but he's also terrified. The first act also has an event that starts the action of the story. Sometimes this is called the inciting incident. It's typically an event that forces the main character to go on the adventure. For our example story, maybe the king is planning to put a magical dome up over the whole kingdom to make sure no one tries to climb over that wall anymore. That would force Humpty to act before the dome goes up. So now that Humpty's going to tackle the problem, what's next? Act 2 is all about the action. The middle of the story is when the character goes through the challenges that prepare them for facing the big problem in Act 3. They meet new friends and some enemies. They have small successes and failures. The character moves down the path until the point of no return. It's like being on a roller coaster with all those highs and lows and twists and turns. In our example story, Act 2 would be about Humpty's journey to the top of the wall. The important part is that each event and challenge lead to the next one. Let's say that Humpty thinks the easiest way to get over the wall is to climb a ladder. He can't buy one that big, so he decides to build one. But his nosy neighbor sees what he's doing and threatens to tell the king. Now Humpty needs to lay low, and he thinks low is the way to go, especially since he doesn't like heights. He can try to go under the wall. He talks to his friend, the mole person, who's also the only one of his kind in the kingdom, and who digs the basements and the wells. The mole agrees to help, and they try to tunnel under the wall, only to find it won't work because the enchanted wall goes way down under the ground too. Maybe the mole has an inventor friend with a drill that he borrows if he encounters big rocks. The inventor's got a better idea than making a hole in the wall, though. She's been working on a balloon because she wants to leave the kingdom and see the world. Now she also needs to escape before the dome goes up. Another thing that often happens in the middle of Act 2 is the midpoint of the story. That's often a challenge that doesn't turn out the way the main character expected, which causes a shift in direction. It could be learning new information that changes everything for the main character, or it could be coming to a fork in the road and the main character having to choose which path to follow next. In our example story, it could be the point where Humpty discovers he's got a small crack in his shell. Being trapped in the kingdom hasn't kept him safe after all. Maybe he also discovers there was a secret letter in his baby basket that said he was from a town on the other side of the wall. If Humpty doesn't leave now, he'll never get to find that town. The midpoint event is followed by additional challenges that cause more trouble for the main character. Maybe the friends have issues getting supplies they need for their balloon. Maybe the king has posted guards along the wall now because of that nosy neighbor, so the friends have to change where they're going to launch their balloon from. Maybe the friends have to postpone the launch again because a bad storm rolls in. By the time Act 3 starts, things aren't looking good for our main character. Oftentimes, stories will have a moment where it seems like all hope is lost. For our example story, that could be the friends getting caught by the king right as they're about to launch their balloon. Humpty is lucky to escape, but now the balloon is ruined and he's on his own. Time is almost up. What does he do? That leads to the climax of the story, where our main character faces the big problem. In adventure stories, it's the big battle with the villain. In mystery stories, it's when you find out who committed the crime. In our example story, it would be Humpty finding the inner strength and courage to finally get up that wall. Let's say he builds a glider out of the damaged balloon. Then he gets his big ladder. He can't climb the wall, the guards are still patrolling it, but he can climb up the tallest building in the kingdom, the castle itself, which no one is guarding the back of because who would be crazy enough to climb it? A shaky but determined Humpty overcomes his fear of heights as he climbs up to the top of the castle roof and then uses the glider to fly across the kingdom to the top of the wall. But just as he sits down to catch his breath, he slips and falls off the wall. We know from the nursery rhyme that's not the end of the story. And the climax is not the end of Act 3 either. There's one part left, the denouement or resolution. That's where all our story threads are wrapped up and we understand what has happened. We know that after Humpty falls, he can't be put back together again, but we don't know if that's a bad thing or a good thing. When we write story endings, we want those endings to make sense based on everything that has come before. Sometimes the end is a surprise that the reader didn't expect, a big twist. But we want to be sure it's an ending that could have happened and would have happened. For example, if our story didn't have aliens in it and suddenly a spaceship flies in to save the day, the reader is going to feel cheated. The same thing happens if the main character wakes up and says, "Oops, I guess it was all a bad dream." Our readers have been on this journey with the main character. We want to make them feel like that journey was worth it. So let's talk about two endings for our example story that could work. In a sad or tragic ending, Humpty has fallen back into the kingdom and his shell is completely cracked open and can't be fixed. Maybe he's emotionally broken up too, because he saw there was nothing left on the other side of the wall. Maybe a volcano destroyed everything. The enchanted wall was truly keeping everyone safe from the dangerous world outside, and Humpty learned that the hard way. Yep, very sad. In a happier ending, we could say that Humpty Dumpty couldn't be put back together again because he hatched from his shell. Maybe he's a dragon with wings who can fly over the wall to find his home now, which is still safe and sound, no volcano. Maybe the king wasn't even a bad guy. He didn't know Humpty might hatch. The king was trying to keep the promise he made to keep Humpty from cracking his shell. The friends weren't really in danger either. The king rounded them up and asked them to stay at the castle until they could get the dome up to keep Humpty safe. The friends get released and they all reunite. Humpty says goodbye and flies off to a new adventure. Regardless of the kind of story you decide to tell, sad or happy, adventure or mystery, or anything else you can think of, you can use structure to help guide the journey that your main character takes. In Act 1, the beginning of the story, you introduce the main character, the setting, and their big problem. In Act 2, the middle of the story, your main character goes on the journey that prepares them to face that problem. They'll meet new friends, succeed, fail, and everything in between. In Act 3, the end of your story, your main character will pick themselves up after having hit their lowest point. They'll face their biggest challenge yet, and they'll move on to their hopefully happy ending. You're the author, you get to decide what happens. Structure just makes it easier for you to put the pieces in place. That's it for me this time around. If you enjoyed this video, give it a like, subscribe, and share it with your friends. You can also let me know if there are other topics you'd like me to cover by leaving me a note in the comments. Until next time, happy writing.